I just really like her. I have a few announcements, please, before I enter. Next Wednesday, we have the professionalism forum. We have 3 alumni coming to answer questions, right? So it's going to be a question, answer, discussion. Please post your questions in Miro to get your brains thinking about the design world. I'm going to post where each of them work so you can get a background, a little background. So we're not going to go in who they are, what they're doing. We're just going to, introduce them briefly, and you're going to have a question and answer session about working in the world of design. Okay? The following week, we are going to have a forum. I've invited the people who are doing design topics classes to come in and talk to you about what they're doing. So they're going to give a brief overview of what's happening in design workshop, what's happening in the collective, what's happening in the new design retail shop niche, what's happening in one more class. So I've invited them to come and talk to you so you get a better understanding of what's happening in design topics. All right? So I'm hoping you all will come to that one as well. Great. So now I'm going to start this for you. All right, Kasimu Harris is a New Orleans-based artist, a writer, and a photographer. With his work, he strives to tell stories of underrepresented communities in New Orleans and beyond. He has shown in numerous group exhibitions across the U.S., 2 international exhibitions, and has had 5 solo photography exhibitions. His writing has been featured in the New York Times. He's a writer. Remember that. Best Food Writing, and the Prospect 5 catalog. He's on the Board of Trustees at the Ogden Museum of Southern Art and is a member of the Antenna Gallery Collective. Harris was the 2018 Artist in Residence at the Center for Photography at Woodstock and the 2020 Joan Mitchell Center Artist in Residence. Harris was named one of 8 Louisianans of the Year by Louisiana Life magazine. We are lucky to have him teaching photography and storytelling at Loyola. Please help me welcome Kasimu Harris.
Hey everybody. All right. Thanks for having me here. When I was in high school, I used to cut school all the time and come to the jazz library here. So kind of like, I guess it undermines the reason of cutting school, because if you cut school, you're not trying to learn, right? All right, so this is 2018, and this is the New Orleans Museum of Art. The banners on the outside with the students, that's my photos. So they had this big exhibit there in 2018, Changing Course. It was about the 300th birthday or tricentennial of New Orleans. This is what it looked like on the inside. There's a lot of people there. It was in the Great Hall. I think they said I was like the first or second Black photographer to exhibit in the Great Hall. It was pretty cool. This is in my studio. Some of those awards they talked about, some pictures of my kids and stuff. That globe on the right, that's documentary photographer of the year. And then you see honored artist. Honored artist. It's a big deal, right? Maybe not. This is my transcript from college. You can see I failed orientation to art. What? Failed it. Yeah, man. The teacher was nice. Took it to get the next semester. Yeah, oh, look, man, look. That almost made me change my major. Seriously. I even failed African American literature. Yeah. you know, I feel I did okay at PR principles, you know. Golf, hey, look. I'm showing y'all this, I'm being vulnerable because I remember in high school, you know, people would come and talk to you in college. And like some people just had this fast track, like they always made A's, they went to Harvard Law School, they did all those things. And I was like, man, that's hella intimidating. You know, I've always kind of been like a little indolent student or whatnot. And then, you know, I played jazz for a long time too. And I wanted to sound like Miles Davis, how he sounded in 1963. But I would always forget how he sounded in 1945. It's like a big difference. So that'll be the theme of this lecture, being vulnerable in the long journey to get to where you are. And then even when you get there, the journey still doesn't stop. So I had fun in college. You know, I joined a fraternity, Kappa Alpha Psi. That's me over there on the right. It was really fun. I guess I enjoyed it too much. I stayed for a long time. This is me at Walgreens. I was assistant manager after I graduated. I wanted to go to law school, but I got waitlisted. And I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I knew I didn't want to work there. If you ever saw the Dave Chappelle show when they have the pop copy, that was me on my last day. Like, I am the manager. So after college, I graduated in 2004. Eventually, so I really hated working there, and I felt like everyone there was like, all the managers, it was like where they went for their dreams to die. Someone was in like hotel, restaurant management, someone wanted to be a pilot, and I was like, this ain't me. So I got into graduate school at University of Mississippi in 2005. That same year, Hurricane Katrina happened. So I went to University of Mississippi just as a writer. I didn't do photography at all in undergrad. The type of photography I did, it would be on Instagram, just like, so I took a photography class. I was a TA, and the TA said, the professor said, if you don't come with us to New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina, I'm going to fail you. So like at graduate school, if you get a C, more than 2 C's, I think, you out. So I went to New Orleans, and this is 45 days after Katrina. I'm just starting to figure out how to work a camera, but I think intuitively I had like some good composition skills. That's my mom. This was 2006 after we came back. So pretty early on, after I got into photography in 2005, I continued to write, and then someone told me, do your thesis, every paper you have to do in graduate school, make it on the same subject. So at the end of graduate school, you would have a lot to help out with your thesis. So this is my transcript in graduate school. It's a lot better, but that one semester, spring 2005, 6, I had to withdraw. It just was like the stress of Hurricane Katrina was just too much. And you know, I don't think people really realize how traumatic it was. Now my professor's there. I probably should have went to therapy, things like that. But this is the other circle. That's all that really matters. Degree awarded. So I got a lot of good grades in graduate school, but for everybody, if you are struggling in school and you have a dream and you keep persisting, at least for me, ever since I got a degree, no one has ever said, what was your GPA? So quickly, I started, I still was really drawn to telling stories of New Orleans. And I'm very curious about the city too. Like curious as if I didn't grow up here, like that type of fascination. This is just me in 2009. This is on Louisiana Avenue, just being interested, just saw a second line, and it said, dreams do come true. And this is when Obama was about to be inaugurated. And just having that curiosity and that fascination and taking out your camera and taking pictures. And then I parlayed this photo because I was a writer's intern on Treme. And on seasons 4, I knew that Obama getting elected would be in a script. So I said, hey, y'all, I have the perfect photo for the opening credits. And boom, it went in. So this isn't like my most favorite photo, but I'm showing this to y'all because it's gonna help lead into the process of when I started staging photos, all right? This is Jarvis and Kelly DeBerry, and she was pregnant, so this is in 2012. And I just want to do like this classic shot of a black couple on a streetcar. If I had to shoot it again, I would have put a light on him because it's a little dark right there. So that informed this. This is probably the next year. And this is supposed to be like the album cover for Delfio's album with his dad, Alice Marcellus. So the name of the album was The Last of the Southern Gentlemen. So what I thought to myself was to have this dichotomous kind of thing. I wanted to be very elegant in a Southern setting. So this is outside the John Mitchell Center. And like I said, I worked on Treme, so I went, when movies wrap, a lot of times they sell all the props. So this is a fake piano and all kind of other stuff that we wanted to really present being Southern. So the reason why I wasn't the album cover is because I didn't get my contract right. Like I had this big, grand plan to do like a behind the scenes kind of thing where things like that wasn't being done, and to do like a making of the album and the making of the cover. So when I told him the price, which I didn't tell him before I did it, he was like, what in the hell? Never mind. So bank that, get your contract signed, negotiate before you snap a photo. Design anything, write anything, and make sure you try to always own what you do. That informed this. This is 2015. This is Malcolm and his then wife, Marissa. Malcolm Jenkins played for the Saints. So this was for Dandelion. So at the time, it was the biggest exhibit I had been in, curated by a woman named Chantrell P. Lewis. And that went on to travel and become a book published by Aperture. But this was just me and my big ideas, wanting to elevate style. And the initial idea was to have him and his wife on the banks of the Mississippi River on the east bank, the west bank, shooting back to the east bank, like them eating dinner outside, kind of lovely. It didn't happen. So the day of the shoot, I just started scrambling, right? So I remembered, like, oh man, Ted's Frost Stops on Claiborne, they always have these classic cars on Fridays. So I cold called Ted's. They didn't know me from Adam. She was like, I know just for who you to talk to. She cold called somebody. And then that day, someone showed up with a car for the shoot. So trust your big ideas and don't really take no for an answer. And this is the same day. This is in Algiers Point Bar. And this photo references the photo American Gothic by, I forget the original artist's name. And then Gordon Parks, he did an interpretation of it. And I was trying to explain all this to Malcolm Jenkins, and he was like, I don't get it. So then I was like, just stand there. But after that, you know, it went well. But then after that, you know, I came back home. I was having some bourbon with my assistant, and I looked in my bag. I told my class this story, and I looked in my bag to start to upload the memory cards. I couldn't find any memory cards. So then we start scrambling. Everyone's looking for the memory cards. One of my friends, Jabari Greer, he played for the Saints at the time. He was looking for the memory cards, and then we went to dinner. I was ready to cry because I remember Delfio saying, like, you not ready, because I had the contract situation. And I was just about to call Malcolm and tell him, bruh, I messed up. I lost all your photos. And I went home, I prayed about it, and I looked in my bag, and the memory cards were there. So, you know, I don't know the lesson in that, but hey. I still love staging photos. This is the stuff you saw earlier with, this is called Worn or Benighted. So this is like getting into my artistic practice. All this stuff is in my artistic practice. Now prior to this, I had done baby showers, parties, weddings, everything that I don't do now. I hate all that stuff. But doing all those things gave me like a very dexterous skill set to just do all kind of stuff, right? So I never had like the elite kind of thing because I was like, I need money. So I did it. But all that informed where I am now. So this is Warn the Benighted. It's about a nonviolent coup d'etat of students getting so upset with the school to prison pipeline, post-Katrina education in New Orleans, that they have this uprising. And they start to break into schools and things like that for a reason, not just to be bad kids. This is in City Park. This is like 2015. I did 2 iterations. This is in 2018. The name of this photo is The Struggle Begins Before School. And I'm thinking about the demise of neighborhood schools and the peer pressure that students get prior to even getting into school. So I didn't want to have like a typical kind of thing where antagonists and standing on a corner. I didn't want to do that. So I just thought about this real store that's right next to a school on St. Claude Avenue, and the alcohol was, even though I like alcohol, was enough of the negative influences for kids to represent. And I don't know if you know anything about New Orleans schools, but prior to Katrina, most people could walk to schools. Now you see many students at the bus stop before the sun even comes up going to school. Back to 2015, just thinking about people who had these coups, Toussaint L'Ouverture, Marcus Garvey, Kathleen Cleaver. And then this is called Past Lessons Applied, where we're really embodying Toussaint L'Ouverture, and the pink slips are in reference to the 7,000 teachers and teachers' aides who were fired after Katrina. Teach for Us is a play on Teach for America under new management. You often see these schools under new management because they're failing. So that's what this is, and they are trying to cripple the system, taking whatever documents that they have. So another thing I learned on Treme was like locations, scouting locations and things like that. I couldn't go to a school and say like, hey, I have this wonderful plan. So I went to a place that was a school and you just play it. It's condos now. So it's also, the title is called Past Lessons Applied, From the First of Blacks to the First of Whites. Toussaint L'Ouverture wrote a letter to Napoleon saying, you know, from the first of blacks, me, to the first of whites, you. So when I do these storyboards, well, I don't storyboard, all right? I can't draw that well. But I write out like a pretty intensive outline. Early in the practice, it might be one sentence, but now it could be a page of just writing before I shoot. And what started to happen with my art practice is that I would hire someone to do set decoration, just one less thing. I hired a wardrober, and then even for the people who are the actors, it allows them some reference to look at. And everyone reads it pretty much like they do on a movie. And it really helps the process go along. Instead of when I'm getting there, I'm explaining everything. Everyone's on the same page before we even get to the site. This is Race to the Top. And on that outline that I was telling y'all about, this was idea D. So I had a bunch of other ideas. And all this came about is because this guy, Russell Laura, came to my studio. At the time, he was curator of photography for New Orleans Museum of Art. And he's like, yo, I want to do a studio visit. I'm like, okay, cool. I had never had a studio visit by like a big time curator. So I spent the night in my studio just all night. I spent like $1,000 printing out all these nice new photos. And then I had photos that I just ran on my little copy machine up on the wall. And my son, he was like 5 at the time, he was there too. So Russell came to the studio and he just like walked through and just doing like this. I was like, man, he don't like nothing. And then he was like, well, these are the photos I want to talk to you about right here. They were just like the ones I printed on a piece of paper. I was like, man, had I known that, I could have saved a stack. So, and then I didn't know what was the purpose of the studio visit, so that he was asking me like, well, how would you continue this project? What would you do? And then I was just like, yeah, man, I would shoot with a 4x5 camera, film camera, and do it real big. Like, I was just talking freely because I was like, you know, surely this dude, I don't know why he's here, but, you know, I should just talk freely. So at the end, I was like, well, why are you here? He was here to ask me to be in an exhibition, and then, like, I'm in the parking lot about to cry. I was like, man, you had me at hello. You didn't even have to explain all that. So that was I took that with a 4x5 camera. It was pretty fun. And the earlier idea was to have a stadium full of people. Then at the time I'm taking this, like, the only way to get a stadium full of people was to go to a football game. And then I started to think, well, if you're looking at this, just logistically to try to get all these people together and try to do it during halftime. And then I was like, as a viewer, I think you would look at the photo and be distracted by seeing who you know in the audience. And then I thought to myself, well, if the stadium was empty, it would say more, because the dichotomy of it, that they're like in a starting block position, clearly they're doing academics, they're in an athletic setting, and it really spoke more to who shows up for black kids as it pertains to education. So sometimes idea A isn't the best. I had to go with D. I'm still really interested in culture. I've always been the type, some of my students in my class, sometimes I hear them say they're so nervous to go up to people. I don't think I've ever been that way. Maybe it's my personality, but I can visualize a photo a lot of times before ever taking it. And I just kept thinking about people in New Orleans, particularly the black community, who kind of borrow from the African diaspora of doing so much outside, particularly playing chess, checkers, and things like that. So I just saw that photo in my head, saw it. And one Saturday morning, I had my camera and I saw it happen. And I just walked up to the guys and told them what I wanted to do. They was like, yeah, bro, go ahead. And I took the photo. And I actually got their names, and they actually came to the exhibit to see the photograph. That's really important to me. I see a lot of times, it's not always possible to do, but I think about a Walker Evans photo that he took in Cuba. It's this beautiful black guy in a white suit in a market, and it just says, man in suit and market. You know, it's like, who's his family, who's his legacy, who is this man? So I do try to always get a name. This is St. Joseph Night 2015. This is called Wild Man Calm. That's the wild man, and if you know anything about black Mexican Indian culture, a wild man is never calm. But we were walking from the Big Chief's house to 2nd and Dryads, a bar called Sportsman's Corner. And I was just still thinking about, a lot of my work is about like the African trickster, where you think you're looking at one thing, but you're really looking at something else. So the Trojan horse of it being a pretty photo, but I'm really deeply examining gentrification in this photo, and the cultural violence that displacement has. So this is Central City, where a lot of traditionally black middle class or working class people lived. Slowly, that area, or quickly, depending on who you ask, the area is changing a lot. So what's going to happen when black people don't live in this place that is the epicenter of culture for Uptown? That's the question that I'm asking. Art is not always about answering a question, but it's about giving an answer, but about
asking better questions. Technically, like my process is, I was with these guys all day. That's Big Chief Bo Dallas. So right now they're singing Indian Red, which is like a real spiritual song that they sing before they begin to process out in the streets. So unlike Zulu or Rex, where you have a set route on Mardi Gras Day, Indians process throughout the neighborhood, and they may they may start off by going to the stick and shedding, one of those church terms. The people who can't move, they go see them, and then they may come out of a bar or a home, and they just take a route through the neighborhood, but it's not a planned route. So he's coming out of Second and Dryades. I have been with him all day, and they're singing Indian Red. So what I did was just kind of, someone was like, come. I like scooted up under an Indian and just got real close. I would have a photography professor, D. Michael Cheers, the dude who said he was gonna fail me if I didn't go. He would always say, closer, get closer. He would always say that, closer! But sometimes you gotta get far back too. So when I'm doing a lot of cultural work, interestingly enough, I'm thinking about abstraction a lot because you have so many photographers out there doing the same thing. It's like, how can I show the same thing differently? So this is, instead of getting closer, I went all the way back just to try to get as much as I could. And this is Darrell, Montana, and this was supposed to be his last walk. This is downtown, like I think the 6th Ward, 7th Ward, and he's walking to another black bar. So I don't even know the name of this photo, but that's what it is, just about the process. One thing that I will say as another life lesson, this is Romel Ross. He's a writer, he's a photographer, and he just directed a movie called Nickel Boys, based on a Coastal Whitehead novel. So I bring him up because I want to mention ego. I've learned that whenever I put my ego aside, good things happen. So back in 2018, Richard McCabe curated this exhibit called New Southern Photography, and he asked me to write an essay. And I was like, man, why in the hell am I not in this damn exhibit? And I was like, man, I'm not about to write it. So I called my mentor, Daoud Bey, and he was like, you absolutely should write this essay. He was like, because you get to the first draft of history and writing about your peers, it puts you in a different position. So I did it, and of the 30, 40 artists whose work I connected with the most, it was Romel Ross. So because I put my ego aside, wrote 2 or 3 really good articles about Romel, and we stayed really cool, when he directed the movie Nickel Boys, he said, bruh, would you want to be the unit still photographer? I was like, hell yeah. Now, if you know anything about unit still photography, to get on a major motion picture is crazy. You have to have, I think, 30 days of work. So it's like, well, how the hell are you gonna get 30 days of work if you don't have 30 days of work? It's like the Mos Def song, how am I gonna get ID if I don't have ID, So luckily we were able to usurp that because Louisiana is a right to work state. So I did that, and at the end, I had enough to get into the local 600, the Photographers Guild. So, but putting away your ego is always good. That happened with this too. So I was talking to a guy, I'm drawing a blank on his name. He writes for the New York Times. I don't know why I'm drawing a blank on his name, but we never met, but we had talked on the phone. And at Leah Chase's funeral, he was asking me some questions like, what are you working on? Whenever anyone asks you what you're working on, you better make something up, right? Like if it's a curator, if it's a client, just run through all the ideas you have, seriously. So I told him about this idea. He was like, man, do you mind if I write about this? Because the project was already underway. I was like, nah, man. He was like, do you have a book agent? Do you want one? I was like, yeah, nah, I want all that stuff. He was like, okay, I'm gonna write about it. So he writes like breaking news, so this isn't a breaking news story. So long and short of the story, it kept getting pushed back, it kept getting delayed, And one day he was like, bruh, why don't you just write it yourself? And I was like deflated. I was like, I want somebody to write about me for the New York Times. And I think he heard it in my voice, and he said, you will get a double byline, though. And I was like, oh, snap. So, again, put your ego away. This is some of that project. This is called Vanishing Black Bars and Lounges. So, in a sense, it's a departure from the practice that you saw where I'm staging stuff, but it's still just a through line of storytelling. This is for Rhett's Bar, Uptown. This is Victor Dawkins. He owns a bar, The Other Place. For a while, he was the only black bar owner on St. Bernard Avenue, where when I was growing up, bars on St. Bernard, black-owned bars on St. Bernard Avenue were ubiquitous. There's 2 now, but it used to be like 8. The rest of the bars are white. Again, what happens is when a black bar turns white, 99% of the time, the cultural traditions that were practiced there get displaced. So the community, they're displaced. Because with these black bars, it was always a respite and a place where you could go and be respected. When you couldn't go on Bourbon Street and have a drink. And black bars here in New Orleans date back to like the late 1800s, like the Pythian Temple, they had a place where you can drink. Economy Hall, late 1800s. There were all these places that this long tradition of when you couldn't go anywhere else, you could go there. And like the Friends kind of theme, like everybody knows your name, you could be safe, you could be respected, and you could go and walk on home. This is St. Joseph Night. This is the Purple Rain Bar that had been there for a long time. It's shuttered now. I don't know what it's going to become, but this is St. Joseph Night again, and just kind of thinking about that. And, I don't know how well you can see, but there's a piece of road stuff right there where it's kind of like pointing to the bar. On the left-hand side, you see a door open, and then you see the lady just standing there. And like for me, when I'm like reading deeply into the photo, it's just speaking about the loss of the bar. But the Indians are not coming to the bar, they're going away from it. So it's just like a lot of layers when you're reading into it, but it's all about the loss of this place. Thinking about abstraction again, this is Big Chief Bo Dallas, but the scale of his hat or his crown compared to everyone else. Again, I think it's important to step back. This is in Mississippi. I was in Mississippi with a guy named Dr. Howard Conyers. We were working on a book about barbecue, and we went to Clarksdale. My idea about Vanishing Black Bars came from 2 different places. One, Roy De Carava, or even more directly, a guy named Bernie Imes, who had this book called Juke Joints, about these places that were ubiquitous in Mississippi that are now like languishing in single digits. And I thought to myself when I read the book in graduate school, like, oh, this is something I could do for New Orleans. And I didn't think that the idea would come back as quickly as it did. I thought I had forever to do it. Another thing, if you have a story idea, work on it now, because, your grandmother or the old cook at your school or any kind of thing, people don't live forever. So don't procrastinate on stories. That's really what I want to say. This is his hands. I have a thing for hands. And I didn't know this guy from Adam. I walked up, told him what I want to do. He was like, man, come through, do it. Do whatever you want to do. This is like a total deviation from that. This is going back to what I would call constructed realities. This is the story about Fox Rich. Her and her husband were ensnared in a robbery. They were entrepreneurs and their funding fell off, and they decided to try to rob a bank to get funding to open up this hip-hop clothing store. So this is the first project that I used visions and verbs. So images and words. And I've always been a really industrious person, so just to kind of peel the layers or demystify things, I knew I needed a van, and I had a van. And in my studio, someone was like, dude, down there has a van. His name was Tuba Skinny. And I just knocked on his door and I said, hey, Tuba, I know we don't know me and I don't know you, but I like to use your van. He's like, cool, just bring it back tomorrow. So this is behind my studio. And this is a little longer, but this was for Per Sister, about formerly or currently incarcerated women, and it was an exhibit at the Nuka Museum. I'll read the next one because it's probably a little shorter. And this is Jessica Thibodeau embodying Fox Rich. So the way the project worked was someone interviewed them, and then you listen to the interview, and then you go and take the photos or do whatever your artistic practice was. So the interview I heard was really good, but nothing about it inspired me visually. So I went to Fox Rich's home and dug a little bit deeper. And then this is her. She was explaining to me how it was when she found out she was pregnant, but she was incarcerated. And she said a prayer and said, Lord, please don't let me have my babies this way. And again, she was telling me about the officer being there and how inhumane they treated her. And, I'm thinking about three, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost with the shadow, the reflection, and then her. And that was the prayer she said. And then this one was, I call this one Freedom Day. Now this one made me nervous, not to take the picture, but to show, even though this isn't Fox Rich, I was nervous to show Fox Rich and her husband this photo. So Fox was telling me what it was like when her husband came home and the first time they slept in bed together, and when she rolled over and realized that she wasn't alone anymore. She had slept alone for 20 years. And so for me, hearing that, I thought about heaven on earth. And how do you embody heaven on earth? I hired my same set deck person, took the bed from my wife and I's bedroom and put it outside in City Park. That's what she said. Last night he reached over and put his arm around me. I rolled over and held him tight. It dawned on me that I was not alone. This is just some of the stuff that I've done. This was for the New York Times Magazine. And let me tell you, the New York Times Magazine pays a lot different than the New York Times newspaper. And all that came about because at a certain part of my life, like I kept applying for that New York Times portfolio review. I kept getting rejected. I didn't know why. Finally, I asked someone to look at my work and help me sequencing. Sometimes it's not about the work you have, it's about how you show it, what should be in there, what should not. When you're doing a portfolio, it's only as strong as your weakest image. So for photographers in here or anyone, really edit yourself tightly and then get someone else to do it. So when I did a portfolio review, one of my interviewers was Kathy Ryan. She's head of photo for New York Times Magazine. So after I did that, things started taking off and I started working for the New York Times. So this is about the number of members of the Zulu Social Aid and Pleasure Club who died after Mardi Gras. And this is all outside. So it looks like a studio, but because of COVID, I hired two other people and we were working outside and did this outside studio kind of thing. And Kathy said she hired me because she knew, again, that ability to talk to people and forge relationships quickly and having a shorthand, how to not make people, but get people to feel comfortable. As a creative or as a photojournalist or as a writer, like you talking to strangers and you're going into people's homes, sometimes at their most vulnerable times. And you have to do that with a certain type of care in sympathy or just understanding. I really meant empathy. I thought this photo was going to be the cover because they sent it to me. I saw the mock-up. I saw that mask head. I was in heaven. And then when it came out, before it came out, they was like, yeah, bro, I didn't make the cover. And I was like, man, is there anything else I could do? Because, you know, for something like this, you working with the editors pretty tightly, like almost sending dailies, because it's like a week lead time. You know, they like, you need headroom for the title. Like, whatever you take, make sure you do verticals. And so I saw the mock-up. I was like, man, I made the cover. And then they used text. So, and it was who lives, who dies. I was like, man, expletive, expletive, expletive. And I was like, man, is there anything we could do? And he was like, man, Kathy fought for it, but even Kathy lost. So, you know, even a win, sometimes you have a loss. So it's still a cover story, but I wish it was the cover image. That's a family who obviously lost their father. In my mind, I was like, you know, I don't want all these photos to look the same, so I asked her to get his Zulu coat, which is really prevalent among the members, and we draped it over the chair. I asked him to get a portrait just to show that emptiness. It wasn't in this, but I have a photo of her sitting in a chair with the coat draped around her, just like in between a shoot. Then we did something else called Still Lives, where they asked all these photographers who were, you know, at home to take pictures of their family or their surroundings during COVID. So this is my wife and my daughter hanging out. She's probably taking a call for work or something like that. One of my sons, and again, I got to write for the Times again, which was really cool. And this came along. I remember when I got the call for this, just to be honest with you, like even before this, I had this solo show of the Vanishing Black Bars in Pittsburgh. This was like a big deal for me at the August Wilson Center. And then I was in this thing called State of the Art 2020 at Crystal Bridges, where they went around America and found 60 artists to exhibit there. And I was going to New York to speak with a literary agent. It's just, things are rolling. And then that Rona brought it all down. So I remember being outside when the Times called me for the story, because I was like trying to fight off not being depressed. It's because like everything is rolling, then it came to a halt. And this was the first thing I had after the coronavirus hit. They was like, yo, you could do this from home because you can't go nowhere else. Just a portrait of the family. That's my wife. I still practice photography. So I bought a Hasselblad recently, and when we went to Greece, I was like, I'm not going to do any cell phone photos. I'm not bringing the digital camera because I don't want it to feel like work. So I just took a Hasselblad, getting in preparation for my next project. I'm still a versatile photographer, I would say, or storyteller. That's Nina Compton, working with her. I think that you shouldn't limit yourself. This is my most recent work. Denicia Taylor, she won an award for being an awesome educator about drinks. There we go. And that's Neil Bodenheimer, Cure Bar, nearby here. Sometimes I've been knowing him for a long time. Sometimes you just ask people to do different things. I was like, stand up on the bar, bro. And this was like the last photo we did that day. And he told me, this place has been photographed so many times, but I just took a step back. I think you should always do this, take a step back. I know when I'm writing, after you finish a draft, you have to set it down for a little while and then come back to it maybe the next day. But in photography, you don't always have time to do that. So I just put the camera down for a little while and look. And I saw this, and after we took it, he was like, man, as many times as this place has been photographed, it's never been photographed from this vantage point, because I want to show the expansiveness of the bar. And to his left, you have all these vintage bourbons and this big open window and this big bar. So I think this is the last thing I shot. And at this time, if you have any questions, I love to answer them. Thank you.
When things go wrong, like you mentioned Katrina and like, that was great. You mentioned Katrina and like even just when you failed orientation to art, you felt like giving up. When things go wrong, when you feel like giving up, how do you keep like going and keep working through?
Couple of different, well, I mean, you saw how I did in college. So in graduate school, I was like, I ain't effing this up. Like,
You know, I really was determined to finish. And I really believe that I could be like one of the greatest storytellers ever. And I don't say that like, who says, man, I just want to be in third place. I mean, I don't live like that. I mean, I have a family, I have 3 kids, so it's like, some of it's like, I need to eat, I need to work. But a lot of it is, and then having a support system too, like being able to talk to people, being vulnerable. But despite whatever failure I've had or a failure someone has assigned to me, I have an unwavering belief in myself. So I never question that. Whenever I do get blue, it's more of like my productivity goes down, but I never want to stop. So that's how I get through it. Yeah.
I really liked the part where you showed your college transcripts and showed that you had struggled with classes. How much would you say, by comparison, do you think you've learned in school versus out of school?
That's a great question. I don't use biology. I don't use algebra. Probably the most stuff I use is from business classes that I took. Like, you know, I'm an entrepreneur now. So, and then some of the stuff like being in a fraternity where, like I went to a predominantly white school and you only have like a small population of black people. So like trying to think of inventive ways to have a social event to get people to come. I would say, I finished college like 20-something years ago, so at the time that knowledge gap helped me get to where I needed to be then. Now, 20 years later, it's so far removed from that, but it is some classes I could go back and say this was helpful, like that PR class, even though I made a C in it. Before here, for 3 years ago, I worked at Dillon University. I was assistant director of communication, and it was a lot of PR, and I made a C in that. I think it's just about showing a fortitude that you could do it. But like lights, I teach my class, we went in the studio the other day to use lights and stuff like that. I never learned that, but I never took photography in undergrad. When I took it in graduate school, it was documentary photography, which you don't need lights. So I say it's a decent balance, but the older you get, the more you rely on your real life experiences. And I know my class can attest to this. I had a problem in college that we didn't have enough practical application. It's so much theoretical. I like that about the sciences. You're gonna get a 1-hour lab of you gotta do whatever they taught you. So I think college should have more of that. They didn't teach me how to write a pitch to an editor. They didn't teach me like you need to network, You could do all this stuff in a vacuum, but you might need to go to a bar and have a beer, or you might need to cold call somebody and say, hey, I'm in your town, I wanna know if I can talk to you. They never taught me that, but those are all paramount things that you should be doing.
Did you use golf?
I couldn't hear you.
Did you use golf?
Golf? No, not that I wouldn't, but I just wasn't great at it. That's a different level. That's when you're trying to get that deal done, baby. I saw a question over here. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So I heard you talking about cold calling and stuff like that. Like, can you talk more about like what you're saying to people and people in prison? Are you talking to the phone? Are you like calling the higher ups? Or are you like just talking to people who are like on the ground floor? Like, I just wanted to know.
I've done it all. I cold called somebody at this place called Aniston Store one time, and I was like, hey, I'll be in town. Is it a possibility I could come by the newspaper and talk to you? And I wound up getting a writing test, like straight up, had to go out and report a story. I thought it was just going to, shoot stuff, So be prepared if you do cold call somebody and they answer. I still do it. Like there was an editor at Fader magazine. Like we were emailing each other, and it just wasn't really working out. Then I was like, "Hey, I'm gonna be in New York," and she's like, "Come by the office." That happened with Southern Living one time too. Like I met the editor, and they were like, "Drop by campus." I'm like, "Oh, okay, cool." And then I went in there. It was like a meeting of 8 people. Like, dang. So sometimes people do answer, and you just have to be prepared. Like, have your portfolio, have several ideas, or whatever. And whenever I travel, even if it's business or pleasure, like if it's a curator, like, hey man, let's go get dinner, let's go get lunch. It's really been advantageous. I had lunch with someone, Mikhail Solomon. She has the Prism Art Fair dinner. I had dinner with her in Miami in January. She called me the other day and was like, "Hey, would you like to be in the Prism Art Fair this year?" So it's like, you never know what happens. And sometimes it can take a while to develop the relationship. And I heard Issa Rae say, network laterally, like this is like your network here too. So, but I think you network all over. But yeah, cold calls do work.
There are a lot of photographers out there, and obviously you take really amazing photographs. But do you think your writing, has also helped you as a photographer getting some of these jobs? I feel like that's another aspect of you that's different from, I think, a lot of creative people in the world.
For sure. And in graduate school, I remember they told me I had to pick. One dude, Ralph Grasson, said I did, but everyone else said you need to pick. You're going to be a photographer, or you're going to be a writer. And I just didn't listen. So I think you need to listen to advice, and sometimes don't listen to it at all either. But for art, how it's helped me in art is that I can conceive the idea and articulate it, right? Art is about ideas. And journalism or other avenues of storytelling, it's just that ability to step back and in writing, you like report for detail, right? Like, what does it smell like? What's the dialogue that you hear? You want to be the eyes, the ears, the 5 senses of whoever is reading. So that type of spirit I've brought to my photography. So it's helped that way. And then, I'm not being funny, some stuff I've gotten, like the first big break I had was I did a style column for the Oxford American called Paris Chic. You can't really find it anymore. But I like to dress well. So dressing well and writing about style, like helped me get into Southern Living or all these other kind of things. And I always parlay that into something else, but I used to write about style. I felt that, they call me the Bill Cunningham of New Orleans, but I used to feel like the epicenters of style were not just in Milan, New York, LA, like places like New Orleans had style too. So that was like the first big publication I got into. So Taylor. Hey.
Whenever you want to get closer to someone to take a photo, I feel like with me, I don't want to make someone uncomfortable. Do you ever run into that problem?
Yeah, people tell you no, right? But like at the point where you're getting closer to a person, I would hope that you've established something already and you talk to them. And then sometimes I let them know, like, hey, I'm about to get in close. And then they usually make a joke that lets me know that they're a little uncomfortable. And then I make a joke back to try to ease them. But, it's not like straight off the bat I'm getting close on something. Maybe something, but not necessarily someone, right? But I think Robert Kappa said it best: if your photos are not good enough, you're not close enough. So you do. I don't say that like to be mean. It's just something you gotta work on. And look, I'm black, obviously, right? And when I go into these black bars, even though I grew up in New Orleans, I still have a little bit of anxiety or nervousness. So it's just a natural thing. Because it's like, if I walked up in here, y'all know I don't go to school, you're like, who is this dude? It's like walking into the high school cafeteria for the first time, and like, oh, who is this person? So what I do, a little technique is, sometimes I take pictures outside first, or sometimes I just sit there first to warm myself up, you know, to take photos. And then if the bar owner has invited me, or a bartender, I might just take pictures of one person first, because I got comfortable with them, and then I start to branch out. So it's like a sport, you know. You don't have to just come straight off the bench and start shooting. Just warm up a little bit, mentally and physically. Hey.
You talked about the New York Times, the paper, and the New York Times, the magazine, and how there's certain distinctions. Could you elaborate a little?
Okay. The day rate for the magazine, because people just don't talk about this enough. I have a friend, Jared Soares. He has this Instagram called Gatekeeping, because unfortunately too many people hoard information and we don't talk to each other about it. For journalism, for art, for all kind of stuff. But the New York Times, the newspaper, they pay $450 a day rate. So it might sound like a lot to some people. It sounded like a lot to me at one point in my life. So it's really more about prestige at some point. If you do like for 3 or 4 days, it starts to add up, which is cool. But the magazine pays on a different pay scale. I don't even remember it, but they pay you, if they pay you for a final file, they just pay a lot of different things that add up. To be totally honest with you, the Who Lives, Who Dies story, when it was all said and done, it was like 5 figures for me and for the people I was working with. That also included hazard pay. But anytime you work for the magazine, you're gonna probably get paid $1,000, $1,200, somewhere upwards to that. They just have a different pay scale. I don't know why. And sometimes the big publications just don't pay the best. I've done something for another magazine, and it was like $3,000 for like 3 days or something like that. I think NPR is like $650 a day rate. I kind of forgot some of that stuff, but that's what it is.
When you go on a photo shoot, you know, for the day, I mean, can you, about how many pictures you probably take to have like enough
Right.
to find that shot?
This might have been 100 pictures for an hour, and I know they needed 2 pictures. And, you know, I was setting up equipment and stuff like that. Depending on what it is, I can walk away with 1,000 photos if I'm shooting all day. It kind of just depends. Like, I'm not an overshooter though. Like I know that one in 2015, it was, because it was like 9-10 hours. It was like an all day thing. I think once you got it, you usually know, and then you can stop, for me. And then depending on the project, after a while, I'm gonna just get a little bored, to be honest with you. And then that's when I start to push myself, you know, wide, medium, and tight. Get what you need, and then how can you push the boundaries of that? But I'm definitely not an overshooter. But the last thing you want when you're working with an editor is if they're like, you got anything else? I'm like, God damn. That means like, something missing.
So that would be my question. You're shooting 1,000 or 100 photos. There's a client on the other end that wants to look at them with you. You're making a certain amount of edits before you share them with your client.
Absolutely.
And then they're saying, you're just together going, no, yes, or.
Yeah, I'm gonna send, first, every edit is different. Like I work with NBC, and they were saying like, send 60 photos, edits. I'm like, bro, I'm not about to do that. Like, I'm not. I'm used to like, for the New York Times, wide is like 20. You send in 20 low-res photos, and then they're gonna ask for maybe 5 back, right? So you have to know how to edit yourself, because you don't want the editor to waste time. Like, why are you sending me 2 of these that look just alike? So again, self-selection is really important. And every editor is a little different. Some people might say I want 30 or 40, but when he said 60, I was like, man, I thought to myself, like, you probably like a real young editor. So I had to push back, you know, like, I'm not about to send you that.
So did you work on the job? Did you get the job?
Yeah, I mean, when you send a wide selection, you already hired, you know, and this is just, if you shot 300, then you roll it down to 20, and then you send them that, and they got ask for maybe 5, 10 back. And get that check. You said I had a question up there? Oh, okay.
How do you process between fine art and editorial photography?
The idea. That's really what it is. It's the idea, really, you know. Like, this would be fine art to me unless I'm, you know, doing portraits or something like that. And then you can kind of do it or something else. A lot of times it's a story, so it's the idea, and then it's how you approach the subject. You know, you have to think like, if it's a 1/8 on the front cover, it's probably not going to be a very detailed shot. It's going to be something that tells an overall story, unless it's something like trauma related, like someone, I'm not being funny, something bad happened, you see people with a lot of emotion, and sometimes that's like more of a medium photo you see. But with art, it's the idea behind it, and it's the approach that I use to shoot it. So it's usually like deep and dark, I would say, but it's just the idea. The ideas are a little bit different, and the approach is a little bit different too. Does that answer the question? Yeah. I think I had another question. All right. Well, thank y'all.